Wilfredo Fernandez, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Michael.
Listen, let's start here with the challenges that X faces in trying to stop misinformation and disinformation on its platform. What are they?
We recognize that we are the global town square for public conversation. And one of our missions is to give people the platform and opportunity to express themselves freely. We've seen the challenges that comes with accuracy of information on the service, and that's why we've developed a really interesting and novel intervention in Community Notes to give people on the service the power to add context to posts that they find need more context, and do so in a way that's really novel, open source, completely transparent, and puts power in people's hands to really add that context, which is important.
In terms of the scale of the problem, you've obviously come up with a solution here, which we'll talk about in a moment, but just how big of a problem would you say the issue is for X?
So I think there's a few different dimensions to this. I think one is, how do you deal with information integrity writ large? You know, there is tons of information flowing. We have 500 million posts every single day, people reacting to the world's events, people opining on different issues. And so often you have the challenge of getting the right context. And so, you know, there's misleading information in a lot of different realms. What the Community Notes does is allow people to add context on a whole range of subjects. So it's been a really interesting way to see how people add context to all sorts of conversations that are happening on the service.
Can you be a bit more specific in terms of just how it actually works? How do you employ Community Notes? How do people get involved?
Sure. So Community Notes is powered by a network of contributors like you and me. So what does it take to become a contributor? First, you have to have an account in good standing, have an account for at least 6 months, have a verified phone number. This helps us with determining the authenticity of the contributors. We're onboarding contributors every week in a fair and random process. We now have over 500,000 contributors around the world. Community Notes is available in 70 countries in every language that X is offered. And so once you become onboarded, you start rating notes. And as you rate notes that are rated helpful, your rating impact score increases, and eventually you unlock the ability to write notes. That's a privilege that you can lose if you write too many notes that are actually unhelpful. Your participation in the program is anonymized, so you're given an alias when you sign up. And so what this does is really, it puts the power in the hands of the people to add the context. And X, on our end, we have no power to place or remove a note. This is important because this helps build trust in the system. And because all the data and the technology that powers it is publicly available and open source, we started to see some really exciting research about the efficacy of Community Notes. People find that this decentralized system is actually more trustworthy than a general misinformation flag. We find that people are less likely to share a post that has a community note on it. We see higher rates of deletion with Community Notes. So it is an interesting signal. What's also important about the design of the system is that it promotes different perspectives. So a community note is only placed on a post when contributors who have historically disagreed on the helpfulness of other notes actually agree that this note is helpful. It's what we call a bridge ranking algorithm. So it's a really interesting way. It's not majority rules. It's not a popularity contest. So it really bridges those perspectives, which is another key design of the system.
Okay, that raises a lot of interesting points here. So first and foremost, is this only applied to these community notes? Will they only apply to matters that are identified by X as potential misinformation, disinformation?
No, they're 100% identified by the people on the service. So the contributors propose notes, the contributors rate the helpfulness of notes, and only when contributors that have historically disagreed agree that a note is helpful is when it ends up on a post. And now it may be that another note comes along and is actually more helpful, and that gets rated and then it gets placed on the post. Once a note is on a post for 2 weeks, it is locked in on that post. And so, yeah, that's another interesting part of the design.
So does that mean then that it will be the community that determines what is potentially misinformation, disinformation, or will X still have a team to determine that?
So this is one intervention, and then we have a couple other misleading information policies. One is our civic integrity policy, which is active around elections, and that's meant to address misleading information that could interfere with people's participation in the franchise of voting. And then we have a synthetic and manipulated media policy. This is a long-standing policy of ours that addresses synthetic and manipulated media. It could be what's commonly known as deepfakes. It could also address out-of-context media. We see this a lot recently in the Israel-Hamas conflict, where you've seen videos of other theaters of war from different years, and we can label that as manipulated and synthetic media. And so those are other two policies that sort of address different types of misleading information.
And how large are the teams that work on those two policies to make sure that they're being followed?
So we have a global cross-functional team of safety professionals that work across all of our policies, who develop those policies and enforce those policies. We're building a trust and safety center of excellence in Austin, Texas. The goal there is to bring more of our content moderation agents in-house and relying less on third-party vendors. This allows those agents to work more closely with our engineers and folks in product, helps us retain better talent, attract better talent. So we're really excited about the progress there. And so we have about 1,700 people all around the world that work on safety.
Okay, but why does X believe that community notes are the best way, a good way of discouraging, stopping disinformation from happening?
So what the research is showing is that people will trust this sort of decentralized system more because it is powered by the people. Again, we can address more information at scale by empowering contributors and giving them the tools. So, one example is manipulated media. So you can actually write a community note on a specific piece of media, and then that note will appear automatically on any other post that contains that media. So we've had about 3,500 notes written on media that have shown on 330,000 different posts. So by giving people and contributors that sort of superpower to be able to really give annotation and context to thousands of posts in one fell swoop is pretty powerful. And again, this is open source technology. So CPAC.ca could implement community notes on their service if they wanted to give the Canadian people, or really anyone in the world, the ability to add context to one of their stories that they may feel would be helpful. So again, it's not always necessarily misleading information, not necessarily a formal fact-checking service, but it's really about what do the people on X feel needs to be added here to give the proper context to a post.
In terms of elections, are there special preparations that take place for X to get ready for an election, in particular to prepare for potential state actors who might try to use a social media platform to influence an outcome?
Oh, certainly. Every year is an election year at X. Right now we're in the throes of the European Union elections. We have UK election in less than a month's time, and we're preparing for the 2024 US election. So we learn from every single election and how well our interventions are going. We have cross-functional teams that meet weekly in preparation for those elections, understanding what the emerging narratives may be that we need to be cognizant of, making sure that our partners, whether they're in government and civil society, have the tools that they need, whether it's making sure their accounts are verified, making sure that they have escalation pathways for problematic content. When we're talking about election settings, there are a lot of different aspects to the conversation that we need to be prepared for. It's not just misleading information about how to vote. It's violent speech, it's impersonation and dealing with deceptive identities. It's all different types of manipulated media. And yeah, as you mentioned, being prepared for potential platform manipulation. And so we have a threat disruption team that focuses day in and day out on thwarting all different types of, whether it's coordinated inauthentic behavior or spam or any type of platform manipulation that could impact the public conversation. So yeah, we're ever ready for elections. Here in the US, we're participating in tabletop exercises with local elections officials just to game out different scenarios that could happen in the lead up, working with secretaries of state and state elections directors. We've met several times with Elections Canada, in preparation for whenever the next election may be. And so that's part of our work day in and day out on my team, is working with governments at the federal, state, provincial level to be ready for elections.
So when you work with governments and have these discussions, prepare for an election, what is the type of assurance that they are looking for from X? What type of assurance can X actually give them?
So for us, we want to make sure that that people on X and the public have authoritative sources that they can go to for the right information. So that means, working with them to make sure that their presence on X is productive and helpful to the people on X and to the public. So making sure that all their elections related accounts and government accounts have our gray badge. So people know that they're hearing from a verified government account. And that's where, they can get their information. That when people search on X for things related to the election, that they are routed to resources on how to participate in the franchise, which is really important. Making sure that we have clear channels of communication in the event that perhaps a government account is compromised and they need to regain access. Making sure that they have the right security in place for their accounts, best practices on how to utilize the service. And so we're on my team, we focus a lot on customer success for our government users. They're really powerful and prolific users of our service, and so we want to make sure that they have all the tools they need to communicate with the public effectively.